Here is a motion picture film. Let's tidy up this tangle of film by putting it on a reel.
Hello, listeners, and welcome once again to Film Swap. My name is David Seeley, the conquistador of uselessness, and I'd like you to introduce you to a couple of heaving bags of testosterone tonight. We've got, on the one hand, we've got my co-host, the one and only ecstatic gaucho himself, except no substitutes, Jonathan Pritchard Barrett. And tonight we've got a very, very special guest. And he's a big hunkin' heap of He-Man. And his name is Dualta McQuaid. Hello,
thanks for having me.
Yeah. How are you doing?
Yeah, good.
Tell us a bit about yourself.
So my name is Dualta McQuaid. I work as a medical scientist in a hospital.
All right. Well, don't tell them which one, because otherwise you'll have screaming hordes of teenage girls with placards standing outside when you come out of work, screaming and going, "There he is!" But anyway, well, thank you for joining us tonight, Dualta. And tonight, the reason we've brought you in here is because we are talking about man stuff. We are mansplaining tonight.
We're in the man cave.
We're right deep into the man cave tonight, and we are going to be talking about manlyhood, manliness,
and manhood, and manlyhood, all three.
Yes. What it was a few months back, Jonathan and I recorded an episode called Girl Power.
We did.
And it was a great show where we discussed films that were relating to the representation of females in film. And we had a really lovely discussion with our guest, a mutual friend of ours, actually, Claire Clark, who came on the show. And we thought that we should, as a balance, as a counterpoint to that episode, and I encourage listeners to go out and seek that episode out. It'll be in our feed wherever you get your favorite podcasts. So you should go and find that because it's a great episode. But we thought tonight we would talk about the male side of the equation in films. And so what we did was I sent out the theme to Jonathan and Dualta, and I said, we're going to call it What a Guy. And that was going to be the name of the episode tonight.
So
I
said,
you can interpret that.
Dwayne The Rock Johnson. All the films are about Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I literally said to you, you can interpret that phrase any way that you want. I said, you literally just take that phrase and, whatever you come back with, we'll have a talk about it. And do you want to tell us tonight about the film that you picked, which I'm very happy you picked it, by the way, because it's a really great film that I love quite a bit. And tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, just with the film of Oh, What a Guy, it made me think of the partnership of two bad guys of cinema. So I picked Fitzcarraldo with Klaus Kinski and Werner Herzog.
Brilliant. It is a great film, and Werner Herzog is one of my absolute favorite filmmakers, and I'm glad that we now tonight are going to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about him and one of his all-time classic films, probably one of his, I think it's fair to say, one of his best-known films, isn't it? He's quite prolific. He's got quite a filmography, but I think Fitzcarraldo and one or two others, maybe Aguirre, Wrath of God, and his take on Nosferatu are kind of like the the key titles of his, aren't they, that everyone is kind of familiar with.
Yeah.
So it's really great to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about Fitzcarraldo tonight. And Jonathan, maybe you could introduce the film that we picked one mutually, didn't we? Because when we have a guest, we kind of think that 3 films might be a little bit too unwieldy to get into one podcast. So we usually just pick one between us.
Generally, yes. And tonight, our choice is Force Majeure, which is a Swedish film that was released in 2014. And it's directed by Ruben Ostlund. I hope I pronounced that properly. And it's a terrific movie, and about a very sort of different side of masculinity. But hopefully we'll have it's a good contrast to the side in Fitzcarraldo.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've got a couple of 2 really, really great films to talk about tonight. But I think first, what we need to talk about is social media. But we're not going to talk about social media. What we're going to do is hand you over to a fantastic pre-recorded message. So listeners, listen very carefully to this because it's deeply important, and you're going to want to bank some of this information for later after you've listened to the show. So we're going to just take a few seconds break. We're going to go away, and then we're going to come right back, and we're going to start talking about our films tonight. And the first one that we're going to cover is Force Majeure.
You can follow the Film Swap on social media. We're on Twitter and TikTok at Film Swap UK, on Instagram at Film Swap Media, and on YouTube at Film Swap_podcast, and at Facebook at Film Swap the Podcast.
And we're back. And listeners, I would just point out too that something that's lacking from the message you just heard was a mention of our new website, which you can find very easily just by typing in your browser filmswap.uk. So it's very easy to remember, and you might want to go there because if you go there, you're going to find out all kinds of information about Film Swap. You'll find our latest episode, and you'll find out about some upcoming stuff. And that website's still, in the embryonic stage, but you're going to want to keep an eye on it, bookmark it, add it to your favorites, whatever, because we're going to be expanding on that there, and there's lots of cool and exciting things coming up soon. So go and check that out, folks, if you get a chance, because it's awesome. So now, folks, I'm going to hand it over to my esteemed co-host, Jonathan Pritchard Barrett, and he's going to introduce our first film tonight, 2014's black comedy from Sweden called Force Majeure.
Force Majeure, yes. And this is a film that I hadn't seen before. In fact, I didn't even think I'd heard of before. But then I went to my big box of screeners, which I'd been sent 10 years ago when I was running this website, a little film blog. And there's this huge, great stack of about 3 stacks of DVDs. And right at the top was Force Majeure. So I'd been sent it
Brilliant.
10 years ago to watch, but I never got round to it completely. And there it was. And I know that one of my work colleagues is a great cineast, and he is a great fan of The Square as well as this film, and he's a great fan of Ruben Ostlund as well. So it came highly recommended. And it's a terrific film. Basically, the premise is that there's this chap called Thomas, who's a Swedish businessman, and his wife Ebba, and they've got 2 children who are sort of under 10s, and they were on a skiing holiday in the French Alps. Uncomplicated at first, and then there's an earthquake. And I'm going to give a little bit away because this is only sort of early into the film, about 10 minutes in, and this sort of earthquake, avalanche comes down the hill, and it is a controlled earthquake, but at the same time it comes worryingly near to the sort of restaurant, outside restaurant they're sitting on. And it seems to sort of basically that they're worried. Thomas runs off in the mayhem, whereas his wife stays there with the children. And then afterwards, she's basically annoyed, putting it politely, and sort of starts to worry, who am I married to? This bloke who scarpers when, things get hairy. And so that's really the sort of the film is the sort of the premise is that the aftermath of this this avalanche. And it's very not earthquake. It's extremely sort of funny amongst other things. It's an absolutely terrific movie. I'd recommend it.
Great. Well, Dualta, did you want to type into first impressions? Was this the first time you'd seen it, or is this something that?
Yeah, definitely the first time I'd seen it. It's the first time I've seen anything by Ruben Ostlund. It's very much focusing on that social awkwardness of, and there's really incredibly cringeworthy scenes when she's explaining how she feels her husband is inadequate, really. And their friends are just sitting in just the most intense social agony that you can.
That's it. It is cringe comedy, basically,
Yes.
a lot of it.
Yeah.
Very much so. Very much so. And the beautiful thing of it, I mean, is that it really examines sort of that modern take on the family dynamic, doesn't it? And the idea of the kind of the gender roles.
Yeah.
Between...
Is it a modern take? I thought it was quite a traditional take that the man's role is to rescue them if
I think this is the point of the film, is that because they're obviously it's a more contemporary film, and it's set in a modern time, and obviously nowadays people maybe have different sort of attitudes than they did back in the day. But what's interesting about this film is it analyzes how this quite seismic event, if you will, this traumatic sort of instance of something out of the ordinary that happens, then immediately calls into question how the relationships and the expectations between within this couple and within this family, and also by extension by some of their friends and other people that they meet along the way. And that's what's really quite fascinating about this film, is that it really sort of drills down on the man's personal ego, the expectations of the wife and the family and the kids, and how these events become to kind of, because they imply really early on that the relationship is perhaps somewhat strained already, don't they? Although it's sort of quite subtle, because they say part of the reason that they're on the holiday is because he's been working too much. He hasn't been around a lot, and it was a chance for them all to get together and spend some quality family time together.
Yeah.
But then even in the early scenes, there's these little hints that the relationship is strained in some ways.
Yes.
And then when this event happens, it then immediately pulls all these things out in their relationship and in the way that they view each other, and that's what I found really brilliant about it. It's incredibly sort of brilliant dissection of those relationships and stuff.
Yeah, when I was watching it, the key scene with the avalanche when they're in the cafe, and there's sort of a lot of things happen at once, and there's a lot of action in that scene. And I actually missed that he had run off without. I think I thought that he had grabbed his son as he ran. And so then when there's the follow-up scenes when she's explaining her anxiety about what happened and about being abandoned, I initially thought that there was a different level to it. And I went back and watched it again to watch that scene again. And then it realized, he had gone back and grabbed his mobile phone and his wallet.
Yes.
That's the great thing. He grabs his phone, not his children
Yes,
or
yes,
his wife, which is sort of so modern.
yes.
Yes, absolutely. It is brilliant, but I mean, I see that's really interesting as well, because one of the key things that I took about watching it a second time, because I sort of discovered this film a couple years ago, I think, so not that long ago, but I think I saw it was on the Arrow player at a certain point, and I checked it out, and I was just totally. It's not very often nowadays that I get blown away by a film. I'm
Mm.
kind of obviously quite jaded, and I'm older, and I've seen an awful lot of films in my time. So it takes a lot to make an impression on me nowadays, and it really doesn't happen very often anymore. But this was a film that totally just blew me away. I thought it was absolutely brilliant, and I think it was quite interesting what you said, is because you missed that little bit about what he did in that moment, and then so that would have colored your interpretation of the conversations and the things that followed. But
Mm.
that is a key thing in the story, is that he maintains
Yeah,
that, obviously his ego and his male pride, and obviously because he knows that she's upset and maybe his kids are upset with him and stuff, so he tries to present a different interpretation of events
Mm.
that
yeah.
she does, and
I
that.
was there with him with that different interpretation of events.
It's
Yeah,
Yeah,
funny.
well, so that's quite interesting, because the
yeah,
film
Mm.
does then spend some time talking about the perception,
Yeah.
talking about how people would have a different perception of an event, something like that happens.
yeah,
Although we kind of know deep down that he knows what he did, and he's just trying to sort of brush it aside, and because he doesn't want, because I guess he's ashamed, isn't he, of it. And I found watching the film, especially the second time, how much I was conflicted between, on the one hand, you know, because he's being a bit of a dick, basically, isn't he, in one sense?
Mm.
But then on the other hand, I kind of also could totally feel for him and understand his position. And so I was sort of empathizing with him as well on a certain level. And it's like, that's what's quite brilliant about the film for me, is the fact that it really rides that conflict. Because any one of us, I mean, we're all of us here fathers, aren't we? We all have families, and we all have these responsibilities and these sort of pressures in our life to sort of, look after our families, and there's all these expectations that people have. And that's what this film examines really well, is like how that, this poor guy makes a split second sort of irrational decision at a key moment when something happens, and then there's all the ramifications afterwards
yeah. And
of,
there's
of
yeah, and this is sort of what you think you would do when the chips are down, and then what you actually do,
Well, that's it.
and how
That's
that
the thing.
image of
absolutely.
yourself that you cultivate can be quite different from reality.
Yeah.
Well,
Because one of the funny things is that because I was sort of thinking, is he deluding himself? Is he deliberately lying? Is he just not sure? Because in a moment of high stress like that, you can sort of, your mind isn't functioning properly,
Yeah,
really, generally.
mm,
And he may not remember because
yeah,
often we sort of black out during moments of high stress.
mm,
And I sort of actually came to believe his side of the story, because when they looked at the video together, he said, "Oh yes, I did run off." And he sort of realised, yeah, perhaps she is telling the truth, and I just
yes,
had a completely I'd built a fiction in my head which I wasn't even aware of. And
yes,
that's a sort of key turning point in the film where he sort of sees reality in a sense. Uh,
mm,
Previously, he'd thought it was, well, it's my perspective and her perspective. And then he realized there's her perspective, which is true, my perspective, which is sort of rubbish, essentially.
yes,
But yeah, there's funnily enough, another funny thing is that as I was watching it, I was thinking, because I listened to this podcast called The Secret History of the Estonia, which I listened to earlier in the year, which is about this sort of ferry, a Swedish ferry that sunk in the Baltic in the early 90s. And the first two episodes of this podcast are extraordinary. Basically, it was a sort of ferry full of, it's got about 1,000 people on it, and it sank very, very quickly in half an hour. And out of the sort of 900 people on it, I think all but sort of 130 died. Sort of 800 people or something died. Anyway, but basically, when there's this extreme sort of very fast, well, the situation develops very fast. People often don't really know what to do, and the people that survived were just lucky in a way. They did the right thing. They happened to do the right thing at the right moment. And but you're not really sort of acting rationally. That's the sort of thing. And then later on, there's this chap Mats who turns up, who's a friend of Thomas. And Mats basically said, it's like on the Estonia. I thought, that's just what I was thinking. Because people did sort of do bizarre things and just happened to survive. So, but I mean, I guess generally one would sort of condemn Thomas for being a bit of a shit, but maybe not entirely.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we all like to think we'd be the hero, wouldn't we, in a situation like that? Like, I mean, they say this in the film. The mate Mats, who's what's the actor's name who plays that? He's a familiar face to fans of Game of Thrones, isn't he?
Yeah,
and he's been in a few other films here and there.
Christopher Hivju.
Yeah. Well, he's. I'm going to assume you pronounce that properly, Jonathan.
Yeah, probably not. I'm sure I haven't.
But he's a brilliant actor, and he's so good in this because he's the friend who kind of comes. They come and join them on the ski holiday, but then they get him in he's sort of Thomas's age, kind of in their 30s or something. But he's got a very young girlfriend with him. He's got a girl who's like, maybe a college age girlfriend who's come with him.
He's 20.
And it's a very really key scene, the bit in the hotel room when they're having dinner, and then all this, they get drawn into this situation. They get told about what happened, and then that whole bit of the film is just so brilliant. And I think you mentioned about how cringy it is, because not in a like as in like it's bad film cringy, but cringy in the sense that you sit there, like it's very, very funny, but at the same time you're just sitting there going like, it's because the social awkwardness and the whole everything, just you sit there kind of going, oh my god, and it just kind of keeps getting worse for the poor guy. And that's what I mean when I say like you do feel the kind of empathy for him.
Yeah.
And you do like to think like, sure, obviously if we were in a situation where it was life threatening and something happened, I'd like to think that I would do the right thing and help whoever was near me, or certainly if it was my kids. But at the same time, you do know, like Jonathan said, that when those situations develop, things happen so fast, and it's all adrenaline and emotional response and sort of fight or flight sort of reflexes, and you just never know how you're going to react in a situation.
Yeah, because the Matt's character goes from explaining things away and coming up with ways why it's perfectly plausible and no, you shouldn't feel bad about it. And then his girlfriend says, well, you would have done the same thing. And, and that pitches him into his own
crisis.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's just brilliant because she obviously like just said this off the cuff. And I mean, people do that all the time, don't they? They just make little comments, whether they say it in jest or whether they sort of just say something in the spur of the moment without really thinking about how that's going to impact the other person. And that was just brilliant how suddenly this guy who's very composed and he's supporting his friend and he's trying to be rational and explain and help them to work through their the problems that they're having, but then just like that, all it takes is his girlfriend to just make one little offhand comment, and then suddenly he's sucked into his own conflict and his own sort of, sort of existential crisis about how people perceive him, and
Yes.
and all this social anxiety and stuff. So it's just absolutely
Yeah.
brilliant film.
It is. It's one of Matt's is an extraordinary looking character. I saw in the Guardian review, the reviewer Jonathan Romney describes him as looking like having midlife crisis mountain man look, which I thought is pretty good. And one of the other things I found when I was doing my sort of research, that it's apparently similar, according to the review in the New York Times, which I didn't read, but I saw that he mentions that it has a similarity to a Ernest Hemingway story, because you were saying how this is a sort of modern, but it's also got a sort of, it's got a sort of, well, um, older, more old-fashioned view of what masculinity might be, perhaps. So, in this story is called "The Short Happy Life of Francis Macumba." And it's basically they're hunting in Africa, and somebody he's trying to shoot a lion, and I think it doesn't go according to plan. And so I found my Ernest Hemingway short stories book. And there it was, only managed to get through 3 pages. But basically, it's revealed that Francis Macumba is a coward, and his wife sort of is very disapproving of him after that. And so it's sort of that's the sort of similarity, how somebody's sort of, well, in this case, it's he's facing a lion. But yeah, I guess that's a story that sort of probably will
Yeah.
be told until
Ernest Hemingway, I can't imagine being very kind to someone he thinks is a coward.
well, the story is The Short Happy Life, so it's short. So I
Yeah.
guess Francis Macumba pays the price of being a coward.
Yes.
Well, I mean, well, that fits in quite nicely with the theme of our show, isn't it? Is this exploration of masculinity, isn't it?
Yeah,
And how those things have evolved over time, haven't they? And that's
Yeah.
why I thought that Force Majeure is quite an interesting examination of the modern take, and has it changed really? Because
yes,
despite all the the way that the changing attitudes about gender roles and how people should be more open, and we don't want to be restricted to all these traditional ideas and things, but when push comes to shove, are these things kind of ingrained in us,
yeah,
naturally, that there's an expectation about a man's, what's expected of him and what's expected of a woman. I don't know. It's just I think that's what's cool about the film, is that
Yeah.
it asks those questions, and it does it in a very clever and entertaining way.
Not to spoil too much, but do you know, I was wondering in the scene where he kind of, I guess he resolves his inner tensions by in when he rescues. They have their family scene on the ski slopes, and there's
Yes.
the mother goes missing, and then he walks in carrying her. Do you think that was legitimate, or do you think the mother staged that to to allow him to resolve his inner psyche? Uh,
Well, I think that was quite something that's quite brilliant about the last sort of section of the film, because there's a couple of incidents, there's a couple of things that happen that, in a sense, do maybe resolve some of this sort of conflict that these couples are having.
hmm,
But at the same time, it's very, very ambiguous, isn't it?
yeah,
yeah,
it is.
And you sort of don't really know. You can see that, and you could say, well, maybe they colluded together for the sake of the children, because we haven't even really talked about the dynamic
Yes,
with the children yet, have we? And
yes,
then there's also the idea that, yes, maybe she did it as a way of trying to resolve it for him
yes. Because this
or
rescue
for
scene
them.
actually happens off camera. So, and that's
yeah,
Yes.
obviously a very deliberate, where we
Yes.
stay just looking at the children's faces as they're looking up the slope. and we
Yes,
stay looking on them, and we don't actually see this rescue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. And there's a lot of beautiful. I mean, we haven't really touched on the kids, and maybe we'll come back to that in a minute. But you mentioned too about the landscape. I mean, this is all set in a very beautiful ski resort with loads and loads of snow
Yeah,
and
lovely.
mountains. It's very beautiful, but the way that it's used very much is very with a lot of expression about the actual dynamic between the characters, the use of the spaces and the use of the cold. And in that scene that you mentioned where people kind of come in and out of they're obscured by the fog and the
Mm.
clouds, so that it sort of, kind of expresses the dynamic between those characters. And I think it's really skillfully done. I think there's lots of really incredible, stunning photography, but also just the use of the landscape and I love that scene when she goes out. She's trying to get away from him for a bit, so I guess she can think about things. So she goes out on her own, and they show her on the ski lift, and it's that those amazing the way that she's framed so that those the what would you call them, the big posts that the lines are on, that the
Mm.
cars are on the tracks there, but they just kind of keep kind of coming into frame at these really sudden intervals, like they're kind of intruding on her thoughts, or they're sort of about how she's thinking about things. And it's really really amazing, uh, and the sound design and stuff as well, because you'll have just these sudden bursts of noise, sort of mechanical noise or something that just kind of, comes in. And I just think it's just amazing. So the film, although it has the pace of it is quite deliberate in a way, isn't it?
Mm.
But it always uses that stuff just to constantly keep it interesting and keep you engaged and wonder what's going to happen, you know.
Yeah,
So
lots of machines, a bit like in last week's what do you call it, Suspiria,
mm,
where there's these machines are quite threatening, and
yeah,
in this one there's the sort of travelator and the
yeah,
ski lifts and all these machines are sort of, and the
that's right.
drone and all these sort of, and the snow plows and all these machines are sort of just adding to the tension as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like yeah, that scene at the beginning in the airport when she's leaving the airport. This is Suspiria, the film that we talked about in our last episode. And when she's leaving the airport, the sound of the doors even becomes quite threatening and ominous,
Yeah,
don't they? And sort of adds to that sort of, what's going on here, what's going to happen. You always have this sense of dread, and this film kind of does that in a way as well. It uses the things around them in that way to kind of, add that kind of tension and
yeah,
those kind of vibes it's sometimes even when they're not saying anything, they'll just be with the kids kind of ushering them onto a little ski lift or something, but the things around them are kind of, adding to that tension and that vibe that's going on between them, even when they're not talking.
and there's also one thing we, as well as attention, the other thing we haven't really talked about too much is how extremely funny the film is as well. There's some bits which just had me laughing out loud. Delta, what's your favourite bit, funny scene in the film?
I think it's that social scene where she is torturing her husband while their mutual friends are sitting trying to look polite, and not intervene, and yet not say anything. And you can tell everybody is just trying to almost disappear. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, my one of my favourite bit, I mean, funny favourite funny bits is somehow he ends up in this sort of nightclub, and there's basically this sort of short scene where there's all these sort of semi-naked guys. Well, they haven't got their shirts on, and they're all dancing, but they're not playing sort of whatever techno or Euro disco or whatever. It's playing Vivaldi, and but it's sort of quite a sort of dancey Vivaldi, and they're all like, sort of going for it, and it's just the strangest, funniest thing. It's absolutely inspired. Love that.
Well, that is brilliant because they sort of dwell on those guys for a minute, and you think because he got sort of swept up in this crowd of young men who are running off to party and
Yeah.
stuff, and then they show them all there doing their thing, and they're all sweaty and drunk and sort of, and you kind of think in your mind that he's joined in there with them, and he's sort of letting off some steam, but then they sort of dwell on that for just a minute or two, and then they just suddenly cut to him sitting in the hallway back at the hotel, and you realize that he hasn't joined them at all. He's still sitting there feeling sorry for himself, stuck outside of his hotel room.
I
It's just
actually think
brilliant.
I think that my favorite funny scene was when they were sitting in the bar and a lady comes over to them to explain how they're the most attractive men in the
Yeah.
bar, only to come
Brilliant.
back 5 minutes later and apologize that she got the wrong people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My mate thinks you're the most handsome man in the whole resort. And then, oh, actually, not you, someone else. Absolutely brilliant.
yeah. And there is that ambiguity too, because you don't know if they were just taking the piss in the first place or whether they, genuinely made a mistake.
Yeah.
And then, so it is just these constant little humiliations of
Yes.
that they experience, and yeah, it's all just beautiful, beautiful stuff. Just very funny.
Yeah.
Can we just touch a little bit? Because one thing I kind of thought of before we started recording tonight was the fact that because the idea tonight was that as a counterpoint to girl power, we were doing a sort of a guy episode, a thing about guys, about men. But I did think in talking about Force Majeure, I would have very much liked to have a female perspective on this film
Yeah.
because it would have been very interesting to hear what a woman would say about how they would interpret this film and how they would what they would take away from it and the kind of things that they would comment on. So I think that would have been really interesting. So I think in a sense we kind of missed a trick tonight because maybe I should have tried to organize to get a female perspective in here as well.
Yeah. Well,
And what you guys think about the kids as well, because I said we were going to touch a bit on the kids, because I think it's quite interesting how the children, they're very always quiet in the background. But how do you think that they, because I wondered watching it again last night about, do you think that they were angry with their father for running off like the mother is? Or do you think that they're just upset because their parents are upset and are having a
I think
a
that's.
row, I
I
guess.
think the latter myself,
Mm,
because they were sort of just so in the moment. They didn't have any expectations about what anybody should do, grown up should
mm,
do necessarily, and they just didn't like their parents arguing. That's my feeling. What do you think, Jota?
mm,
Yeah, there's a scene where the little boy runs off upset with his father, and then when he asks him what's wrong, he says, "You're getting a divorce."
That's it. Yeah.
mm,
Because I didn't think
yeah,
anyone else had ever mentioned a divorce before that. So the little boy, I thought maybe they had and I missed it, but I thought the little boy was the first person to say, "Actually, this crisis in your marriage will probably kill it."
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah. Well, what I saw one thing when I was doing my research into it. Apparently, one of the inspirations for the film was the director had a friend who'd been with his wife in South America and in some restaurant or bar, and basically somebody came in with a gun and started sort of shooting the place up. And I don't know what the husband did, but he did. He was more. He was probably a bit like Thomas. Essentially, he didn't. He didn't do what he should have done, and so that led to issues. And then when Ruben Ostlund decided to sort of research it, he found that after sort of traumas, sort of avalanches and earthquakes and tsunamis and things like that, there's a sort of spike in divorces because this leads to issues essentially. And that was apparently one of the things that sort of gave him the idea for the film. Interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Apparently, the end bit as well with the bus driver was inspired by a YouTube video as well.
Yeah, I looked that YouTube video up actually.
Oh, did you?
And yeah, it's in the Canary Islands. It's these Welsh students from Bangor University, sort of going, just sort of hairy, going down a mountain road, sort of zigzagging down, and the bus driver kept on hitting the barrier, and then they eventually all got out, all hyperventilating by the side of the road.
I've driven on roads in Italy where you've had to do basically like a 3-point turn at every bend because it's so sharp. I wasn't driving a bus though, quite thankfully. The ending kind of confused me. I wasn't sure what they were aiming for with the bus scene.
Yeah, I think it was almost sort of added on at the end. Sort of, he could have finished before then, but he just had this good idea that was just too good to sort of leave out. But I guess it's sort of danger. I don't know. There was some sort of. He didn't act so badly in that time, did he? And there
was that because the mother kind of gets off the bus, and technically she leaves her family behind her on the bus? Is that the point, that it's kind of like a little bit even in the score? I don't know.
Well, that's an interesting point. That she kind of does, and and also the other character. What was his name? Matt's the guy with the beard. He gets a chance also to demonstrate, in a sense, his form of heroism, or it gets sort of in response to the comments that his girlfriend made. So so in a sense, that scene it has a couple of elements to it. About it kind of, in one sense, it reinforces some of the behavior, and in other ways it kind of redeems some of the characters get their redemption, in a sense, and some get their behavior reinforced, because even Thomas, he doesn't actually do anything there, does he? He kind of sits there as almost docile or placid while this is happening, but it's the mother that gets up and sort of takes charge and says, "No, we got to get out of here." So
well, she technically gets up and says, "No, I've got to get out of here." And then he stands up and says, "Right, kids, get your coats. We'll all get off here."
Well, again, this is interesting. I think this is what's brilliant about it, because it leaves things open to interpretation.
Yes.
And I think that's the brilliant thing about it. And I think, in the interest of time, I don't know, unless there was anything in particular. There was one other scene I wanted to mention, which I thought was quite interesting, because while we're talking about the mother, that is a really interesting scene, because she sort of befriends this other lady who's on holiday there, and we didn't really touch on the dynamic there, because she's a married woman and she's on holiday, but she's come on her own. And during the course of the holiday, she befriends some other gentlemen, and it's implied that she becomes very friendly with them. And the mother, who's someone who's having some sort of existential crisis in her own marriage, and has met this woman who's being quite, libertarian and free, and doing what she wants. So she gets quite incensed by this, doesn't she? And she responds to it in a very, it's sort of a combination of jealousy and sort of judgmental, sort of, animosity. And they have that key scene in the, when they're just sitting in the bar having a drink, and she, sort of is pushing her to sort of, well, explain yourself, explain, how does this work for you? How does this, and I thought that was quite a telling sort of moment for her about showing her, her frustrations about, because obviously the thing about relationships is you have to, there's certain commitments that you make, but then seeing someone else who's maybe a bit interprets that differently and behaves differently, and not the way that you feel you're expected to. So she finds that really challenging. And so I thought that was quite an interesting sort of layer to it as well.
Loads of layers in this film.
Yeah.
Absolutely loads of layers.
Well, was there anything else you wanted to say about it, guys?
No.
Pretty good. Well, yes. Actually, I do have one other thing to say.
Go for it.
Yeah. In Swedish, this was called Tourist. And I was speaking to a friend in Japan this morning, and they said that in Japan it was translated as an avalanche in the French Alps. Because apparently Japanese sort of foreign language, well, for Japanese foreign language films are often given a very literal translation to sort of help explain the film. So that's
I can see how that title works, though. Sort of a metaphorical avalanche as well as a literal avalanche.
Works.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I did see that about the different titles, but I very much like Force Majeure because I think that title really sort of, captures, it's a nice play on that idea about, when unforeseen circumstances or something that's outside of your control happens, that both parties are absolved of their responsibilities.
Yes.
And so I think that title is really good to kind of capture, in a sense, the sort of those layers of meaning in the film. So,
and this film has also been remade. It's got a US remake called Downhill with Will
Did you
Ferrell.
get a chance to watch it?
I did. I wanted to, but I didn't get to watch it.
Well, I should say to the listeners that
Will Ferrell has that particular approach to movies that I'd be
quite like
intrigued
Will
to watch
Ferrell.
it. Yeah, see
I like
what they
Will
do
Ferrell, and I like who's the lady in Julia
Dreyfus.
I quite like her as well. She's quite an interesting character. She's a bit like Matt Dillon that we've talked about before. Is that she's someone who, like, she's been around for like 30 years, but she still looks exactly the same.
Yes, yes.
So I'm not entirely sure how she does that, but it's great. But I remember, Dualta, you sent a little message and you said, I'm not sure if I'm going to have time, but I wanted to watch the remake with Will Ferrell as well. And I kind of sent this message back to you just saying, don't bother with that. We're not going to talk about that. Which, it's probably my little sort of cinest, snotty side coming out.
Yes.
But the truth is, I don't think any of us have seen it. So there was never really... we weren't really going to be able to talk too much about it or compare it or anything.
No.
It doesn't have a particular, I guess that's all we can go by, is that it doesn't have a particularly, there hasn't been a lot of glowing recommendations for it. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And, me personally, I don't understand the need for it because I think Force Majeure is just such a brilliant thing, such a great film that I really don't see any reason for Will Ferrell to remake it.
Yes.
But whatever. I don't know if people have seen it. Obviously, folks out there, if you've seen that film and you like it or you don't like it or whatever, we haven't seen it. So by all means, comment or let us know what you think about it, because we'd love to hear about it. And maybe one day, if it falls in front of me and I've got nothing better to do, maybe I'll check it out. You never know. But anyway, I'm quite happy with this film. I think it's great. Dualta, how did you watch it?
How did I watch it?
Yeah. Because we usually just let the listeners know a little bit about how they can access
a DVD
these films.
On my laptop.
No,
Yeah.
but what streaming service? So others can
Oh,
sort of
I
find
watched it on Amazon.
Amazon, yeah. So that's same
Amazon
with me.
Prime.
Yeah, Amazon Prime, yeah. I did too.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Well, it is available on Blu-ray from Curzon Artificial Eye. That's how I watched it. And and actually, they've just recently put out a really nice box set of all of the gentlemen. Jonathan, say his name again.
Ruben Ostlund.
Ruben Ostlund's.
Really?
All of his films have been collected into a nice box set that
Oh, wow.
Curzon has just put out. It's got a fancy package and it's got all his movies in it,
Cool.
including his new one, The Triangle of Sadness. So people, if they want to dive in deep, go hardcore, you can go out and get that. I think that just came out quite recently.
Oh, cool.
So that'd probably be quite a nice set to have. I've only seen the only other film of his I've seen is his most recent one, which is called The Triangle of Sadness, and it's quite brilliant as well. It's very, very good, very, very caustic, and I mean it kind of ramps up the sarcasm and the black comedy side of it quite to extreme levels, and but it's very interesting film. That makes again there's a lot of layers to it, and really makes some good observations about sort of um, modern culture.
Brilliant. Sounds great.
Yeah, so it's definitely I would recommend that, and I haven't seen any of his other stuff yet, but I will hope to check some of them out soon.
The Square, which is his film from 2017, is meant to be really, really good as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very keen to see it. So hopefully next at some point I'll check that out as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, folks, Force Majeure, go out and find it. However whether you watch it on streaming or whether you buy Blu-ray or dig out an old DVD from your screener box, whatever you do, go and find it because it is absolutely excellent, excellent film. Very, very, very good,
I think
and
so.
everyone should watch it.
Definitely.
Okay, so on that note, guys, we're going to take a little break, and then we're going to come back for the big one. And the reason we're coming back is because I've made a promise to a pig who loves Caruso. So I've got to do it. Sorry, that's a reference to the film, guys. No, folks who are just listening and aren't watching, that completely just went over their heads, and maybe yours too. Let us know. So anyway, we'll be back in just a second after a very, 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 very brief message, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about Fitzcarraldo.
Thanks for listening to the Film Swap podcast. You can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Audible, and Google Podcasts, or any of your favourite podcast catchers. If you like this podcast, please consider giving the show a rating or leaving a review. This helps other listeners find the show.
And we're back. Listeners, welcome back. Jonathan Dualta, welcome back to the second half of our manly He-Man double bill, where we're talking about man stuff, films about men and men stuff. I don't know what else to say.
Chaps. Talking about chaps.
We're talking about chaps. We're talking about chaps. The episode's called What a Guy, and it's because we picked a couple films that are examining men and what they're like. What are they like? Okay? Here we are moving on to what is quite possibly one of Werner Herzog's best known films. Absolute classic, starring the late great Klaus Kinski, who was one of Werner Herzog's great collaborators. They had quite a tense relationship on and off screen.
Putting it quite
Klaus
mildly.
Kinski, I mean, he's quite an interesting chap, brilliant actor. Made literally, I think, like hundreds of films over his career. He was known for being quite volatile, his personality. Um, but
He was diagnosed with psychopathy.
was he really?
Yeah,
Really?
Well, there's lots of great stuff. And when you're talking about Herzog, he made a fantastic documentary. When Klaus Kinski passed away, he made a documentary called My Best Fiend, and
yes,
Yes.
it's an absolutely brilliant film where he, talks quite respectfully. I mean, I think they were friends, even though their relationship sometimes was obviously strained, usually when they were in the heat of the creative process of
yeah,
making films. So, and they are both quite, I mean, because even Werner Herzog, he's quite an interesting character, isn't he? He's a one of a kind sort of personality, a
Very good.
really great artist. He's one of my absolute all time favorite filmmakers, which is why I was so glad that when you said you wanted to talk about
Mm.
Fitzcarraldo, because for me, I was at some point he was going to have to come in to the film swap. We were going to have to talk. I'm sure this won't be the last time we talk about him either, because there's a couple of films of his that I'm very, very partial to, and I'm going to want to sort of speak about it
Yeah.
more in depth at some point.
I'm surprised
But
that there wasn't. I'm surprised you didn't choose a Werner Herzog film before. It's
yeah,
amazing that
well,
somebody else had to choose a Werner Herzog film.
well, that's okay though. I mean, that's better that way, I think, in a sense,
Because you are a
because
Herzogian, David.
yes, yes. Well, I'm a big fan of his, and he's a great prolific filmmaker, and he's completely unique. Totally. I mean, I think that's one of the key things that I love about his films is that he has a completely and totally unique perspective. He is not, in any sense, although he has made some commercial films and films with big stars and things. He he tends to have a different way of approaching subject matter. He always sort of focuses on angles in the stories that no one else would pick or
Completely.
choose. He's very much a sort of he likes to get in there. He likes to go and travel to locations and put himself in situations of much. I mean, we can talk a bit about the production of Fitzcarraldo, which was quite problematic. But that isn't the only
I
time
think
he's done
he's
that. He goes to
I think he's one of the only filmmakers that's made a film on every continent.
Is he?
well, yeah,
Yeah,
probably.
That's a
And
good
he's
fact.
gone into volcanoes, and he's gone underwater, and
Went
he's
to
gone to
Antarctica.
totally extreme places, to make films, climbed up, mountains and gone, you know, just all over the place. And I'm quite sure he'd go to the moon or Mars or whatever if
yeah,
someone offered him the chance. And you know what? He would probably make a really, really amazing film as well. Because the thing I like best about it, especially in his documentary work, is he always the kind of things that he focuses on are the stuff that other people would have in the background. If they were making a film about
Yeah.
somebody, like one of my favorite films of his is called The Land of Silence and Darkness.
What a
And it's
film.
a documentary about blind people who are blind and deaf. And there's a lot of key moments in that where most people, if they were focusing on a subject, they'd have them sitting like I am in a chair with the 3 point lighting, and they would talk, have an interview, and they would do that. But Werner Herzog would be focusing on something that's going on in the background, and he would just capture a little moment, this little detail, or something that somebody's doing in the background that you wouldn't even notice in another film. But he
Mm.
instead brings that into the spotlight, and he captures just the sort of elements of people's behavior, and he looks at stories just in a completely different way than other people do.
Yeah.
And I just love him. I think he's amazing. And I'm just the door's always open, Werner. By the way, if you want to come and come on the show, come on to Film Swap, please, and have a chat with us. Recommend a film to us, and we'll talk about one of your films. And
Mm.
it's an open invitation to
Absolutely.
Werner Herzog to come on Film Swap.
That would be
So
absolutely great, wouldn't it?
that would be amazing. So anyway, so somebody out there, if you know him, send him a message and let him know.
Yeah.
we want to talk to him. So anyway, on that note, let's dive into Fitzcarraldo. So Dualta, you recommended this film tonight, so why don't you give us a little introduction to the film and maybe tell us a bit too about why you chose it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Fitzcarraldo it's the story. It's actually based on an Irish guy, it's based in South America, which makes it. That's why I kind of react the tone of surprise in my own voice as I'm saying that it's based on an Irish man, is because you don't get many men in South America. But it's based on a guy who is a rubber baron in South America who falls in love with the opera and has a dream of taking the opera to the Amazon and building an opera house in the middle of the Amazon. And in order to fund this, he comes up with a plan to harvest rubber off a section of river that is inaccessible due to um, really impassable rapids. But he comes up with a plan to get a boat to this section of river by hoisting it over a hill between two different rivers. So his plan is to sail up one river and then pull the boat over a hill to get it into the other river where nobody is tapping rubber, and thus he can make his fortune there and then use his fortune to build his opera house. The film was they initially started making it with US funding and um, with Jason Roberts was the
Jason Robards,
going to be the lead actor,
yeah.
and Mick Jagger had a role in the movie too, and then but Werner Herzog was insisting that it would all be shot in the jungle, and so the lead actor got dysentery and pulled out. And then when Mick Jagger heard that he had got dysentery, Mick Jagger pulled out, and then the studio pulled out, and Werner Herzog was furious at them all for pulling out, so went back to Germany and got German funding to make the movie because it didn't finish making it the first time, and so made it in German with Klaus Kinski then as the lead actor, and the story of the making of the movie is potentially even more interesting than the movie as because one of the key moments is clearly this pulling the boat over the hill. They were asking him how he would film it and how he would do the special effects to do it, and Werner Herzog said at the time that the only way he would make this movie is if they did it for real.
No
But one of
models.
the one of the reasons I wanted to look again at it now is so I watched this movie and kind of fell in love with this movie, I guess, about 20 years ago. But there was lots of things that I didn't know at the time. And so in this epic scene of pulling the boat over the hill, and
Yep.
it is partly so epic because you're actually seeing this massive boat being pulled up a really massive hill and the epicness of that. But the injuries sustained by the indigenous peoples there is also real. And I hadn't fully considered that the first time I watched this movie. And I was kind of, I guess, challenging myself. And I guess it's kind of linking into that theme of what a guy and how we're now we're reevaluating what masculinity means and values that we had, and we're now looking at them and thinking, reevaluating what is right and what isn't. And so I wanted to look back at this movie and think how right is it and how wrong is it? And a lot of people were really, really hurt making this movie, and they probably wouldn't have been hurt if he made it with special effects. And so there's that. That's the counter, I guess, to the you're inclined to almost hero worship this way of making movies and the reality of it, because it runs so counter to everything else is made with special effects. But that came at a real price, and there's the mania that Werner Herzog had in pursuing that vision at any cost, but at any cost to all sorts of other people that maybe weren't included in the decision making. So that's
right. Well, that's a brilliant introduction. Sorry, Jonathan, did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, it is a brilliant introduction. And what one thing I was going to say is that what do you call it? Force Majeure has a sort of companion film, which is Downhill, which is the remake with Will Ferrell. This film has a companion film, which is Burden of Dreams, which is a sort of making of documentary. And that sort of goes into...
Filmed by Les Blank. He documented the behind the scenes during the making of the film.
Exactly.
And it, in and of itself, is a really, really fascinating film.
Yeah, I watched it this week as a part of my sort of research for this. And it's really, really interesting. And how he's, because the funny thing is, Werner Herzog sort of portrays himself as the sort of the straight man and the sensible guy, compared to Klaus Kinski's best fiend, a sort of slightly unhinged actor. But actually, Werner Herzog probably is just as unhinged as Werner Herzog. He's the one that's decided.
If we want to get him on the show, Jonathan, you shouldn't be calling him unhinged. Werner, we understand that you're an artist.
I've been called unhinged, though.
Stable.
That's the thing.
And well-rounded and very intelligent person, and we'd love to have you on.
Intelligent. But yeah, he's sort of But that's just the sort of the background to the film, isn't it?
Well, it is a case where sort of art art imitates life, or is it vice versa? Because obviously the production of the film runs very much parallel to the actual story in the film, doesn't it? Yep. And the fact that he was very obsessively had a vision about what he wanted to achieve with this, and it's very much the same as Klaus Kinski's character in the film, who's very obsessed with his own dream of building an opera house down in South America. And it is also, too, there's all these elements of, and this is very much a sort of a man, an element of manhood and stuff, is the colonialism that the film represents. Because it does on many layers. The film set during this period, I guess, was it mainly in Brazil, but in South America, when they had this big boom of rubber, plantations, and sort of trying to extract the rubber, and all these Europeans came there to sort of take over the place and extract the wealth of all this rubber. And Klaus Kinski's character is trying to get in on that, and he's surrounded by people in the film who are successful sort of rubber barons and have made their fortunes and are running these huge things. But of course, they're exploiting the indigenous people who live there as workers and sort of taking all the wealth away. And but what struck me this time too is just the element, because even Fitzcarraldo's dream in a sense, is somewhat colonial, isn't it? Because he wants to build an opera house. And of course,
Yeah.
opera, certainly at the time that the film is set, was very much this European kind of high art. And
Yeah.
it's this idea that he wants to go and bring this very European cultural uh,
Yeah.
uh, thing and bring it into the jungle and build
Yes.
it there. And he wants to put it there. So, in a sense, although on the one hand, it's a very romantic notion that he wants to bring music and culture into the wilderness, but at the same time, there is a little bit of an element of, you know, bringing Europe and that into an environment where it isn't already, and sort of disregarding the kind of the culture of the people around them and stuff as well. And I must admit that was something I never picked up on until I was watching it this week in preparation for the show.
Mm.
Because I kind of thought to myself, because before when I've watched it, I've always seen it as quite romantic that he wanted to bring.
Yeah.
He wants to use the wealth not to just for his own gain and to build an empire or anything. He wants to bring music and culture and life into the wilderness or whatever. But actually, there's another side of it as well,
Yeah.
isn't there? Which I
I'm
thought
sure
was
because
quite
those people will have their own music and culture already, and
Yeah.
is
yeah,
that there is that cultural superiority, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
aspect.
And that moment in the boat when they're on the boat and they're surrounded in the jungle, they can't see anyone, but they're surrounded by all of these hostile people who are all out in the jungle out there. And of course, he puts his record on. He sort of spins it, puts it on, and starts playing it. And they all go quiet, And that's sort of like, and then they all kind of come out of the wilderness to sort of then greet him and then join him in his quest, if you will, to achieve this thing about getting this boat over. He somehow convinces them to do it. But of course, we learn as the film goes on that there isn't respect there, is there, from either side, because they refer to them always as bare asses.
Yeah.
But then also those people, there's a bit of a sting in the tail towards the end, isn't there,
Yeah.
about what their motivations for participating in this project are.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
And in real life as well, where they offered to kill Klaus Kinski, um,
yes, yes,
and the
there is
scene
that story. Yeah,
the scene
that
where
was,
he's eating the soup and surrounded by
yeah,
all of these native tribes was straight after that. So when they're looking down at him threatening, that's
yeah.
just legit. That's
Yeah.
just how they actually felt.
Well, he offended them. Apparently, that drink
Yes,
that they make, because they kind of chew stuff up and then spit into it and then ferment it. And he apparently was just totally disgusted by this because people were spitting into it, and he just didn't want anything to do with it. And so then Herzog filmed those moments just after they had that altercation, and so you can really get that sense of the tension and stuff in the air during that moment,
Mm.
which is supposed to be him negotiating
yeah,
with them to try to win them over to his cause. So
yeah,
Both films, it seems, have a sort of similar theme as man versus nature, not just man
mm,
as in humanity, but sort of men versus nature. So, because in the first film, Force Majeure, they've got these sort of plows, sort of smoothing out the pistes, and sort of nature's very much being tamed
mm,
there. And here,
yeah,
similar thing. They actually, funnily enough, they in the Burden of Dreams, it turns out that they weren't just doing it using the windlass and these sort of this elaborate system for dragging the boat up the hill. They did actually have a Caterpillar sort of bulldozer that
mm,
that helped with pulling the boat up, which is sort of similar technology to they were using on the pistes as well. And yeah, this idea of but both of them have sort of men subduing nature. I guess both films do.
mm.
But
And it quite parallels a Guru, the Wrath of God, as well, because they're in a way they're kind of similar, aren't they? I mean, obviously the goals are slightly different, but it's obsessive men coming into the South American jungle to try and achieve wealth and power of a sort. Although I suppose in this, power isn't necessarily what Klaus Kinski's is after, what Fitzcarraldo's after.
well,
But it is there is a parallel between that earlier film as well, isn't there? In a sense.
well, they do say one of the robber barons, Don Aquilino, I think, says that he is the conquistador of the useless.
Yes. Well,
Kraus,
yes, I used that at the beginning
yeah,
of the introduction, didn't I?
a great line.
Um,
Great line.
it is. It's a great line. That's why I remembered it. He's the conquistador of the useless.
Yeah, I wrote it at the top of my notes because I thought, well, that's basically that one line sums up the film.
Mm.
And I wonder how that sort of plays in with Force Majeure. He's more useless, less of a conquistador, Thomas.
Uh, well, yeah, I mean, I think too, but I don't know, is he useless? Because he's called that at one point by one of the other rubber barons, who's obviously quite wealthy man, and he's, accumulated all this wealth, and he's there living an opulent lifestyle with drinking champagne, and
Yeah,
he's got waiters and people waiting on him hand and foot, but someone who has a dream about art and creating something and
mm,
doing something unique and interesting, but he's deriding him and calling him useless. But you kind of think, well, these guys, what are they actually doing with all this wealth and stuff? They're just sort of pampering themselves and
frittering it away.
so what's useless and what's not. That's
Yeah,
it's an interesting uh, debate to have.
that's very true.
Mm.
One of the things when I was watching this, it sort of brought to mind Apocalypse Now, which was made at a similar
Yeah.
time, also made in a sort of not on location, not made in the studio,
Mm.
and sort of went way over budget and took way far too long,
Mm.
and there's, and there's also a great making of documentary about it as well,
Mm.
Hearts of Darkness, which is really good. Um, and yeah, I think the two films sort of share a certain, well, some commonalities.
Wasn't there a point where some of the labor force that Herzog had on set sort of burned the set down? I obviously I didn't get a chance to watch Burden of Dreams prior to recording tonight, but I seem to recall there was some sort of an incident where they kind of rebelled and burned the film set down because they were angry about something.
Yes,
He'd
well,
offended them in some way.
he does move the camp, the whole location from one place, sort of 500 miles down the river. I can't actually remember if it was because there'd been a sort of uprising against him, but definitely they both have boats going down rivers through the jungle. That's
Mm.
There's not many films with that sort of theme. There is a
I mean, not being funny, but did they really need to take the boat over the mountain? Because to me, once they got there, they could have gone over the mountain, maybe with some smaller boats. They could
yeah,
have harvested the rubber
yeah.
and then just brought it back over the mountain and put it on the
If,
boat
if only
and
you'd have
taken it
been
back.
there. Yeah, if
Well,
only you'd have been there, you could have told them this
Yeah.
was an amazing idea.
Well,
well,
I must admit again, this is a thought that's only occurred to me this time. I mean, I've watched this film many times over the years, but this is the first time that I actually said, why are they actually doing this? Why don't they just leave the boat where it is and just go get the rubber and bring it to the boat?
well, that is true.
Why are they going to all this
I,
trouble? I don't
I
quite
think
get
there,
it.
I think there was a sizable stretch of this second river that they
Mm.
could. Their plan was to harvest rubber
Yeah,
from along that stretch, and then bring it back to that hill,
Yeah.
where presumably you would have needed a second boat on, and
On
so
the other,
then you would.
but the interesting thing there is that it was based on this true story, a real Fitzcarraldo or Carlos Fitzcarraldo. But he did do this, but his boat was 30 tons, and he broke it. He dismantled it and broke it into 18 bits, which they took over the mountain. And this one was 320 tons, so a lot bigger. And they didn't break it up; they just
Yes,
dragged it up.
yes,
So yeah, why were they doing that? They should.
and
In reality, the reality was that they didn't do that back
yeah,
in the early
Yeah.
century.
and when
Well,
they were
yeah,
making
because
the
then it becomes just the actual act of doing it rather than, the practicality, the actual practical application of doing it is sort of, it's not really necessary if you think about it.
yeah,
but it's only because it's more, romantic and you know, like doing it. It's like that saying, like when the people ask why mountain climbers, who was that famous mountain climber, and they asked him why do you do it, and he just said, well, because it's there. It's that idea of just doing it because it's an accomplishment in and of itself to do it.
Yeah. It's well, because, but I think the thing about Werner Herzog is he has a different approach because as he's one bit he says in the making of thing, he says everyday life is only an illusion behind which lies the reality of dreams, and he says this is his sort of point of view, and this is something that he thinks that the the people in the Amazon feel as well. That's the way they live their lives, and so this is it's intensely romantic. This film, in a way that Force Majeure is basically sort of much more realistic. Basically, not romantic at all.
Mm.
And I think, and I guess it's a film of its time. It's a film of the sort of basically, although it's made in the early 80s, it's basically a sort of 60s film in a sense, because he's a sort of hangover from the 60s. All his films were sort of, well, he came of age in the 60s and 70s, and I think that's sort of something you've got to consider here. The other side of masculinity, the dreaming side, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, and the creative side and um, the drive, to accomplish and succeed at something,
That is
and the madness and the
and the
darkness.
madness of it. Yeah,
have,
absolutely.
have you seen
That's
there's the scene where he celebrates that this declaration that he's going to build this opera house, and he rings the church bell,
yes.
and
mm,
there's
yeah,
this, you can get the scene that they filmed that scene with Jason Robards, and you
Yeah.
can see how when in they Jason Robards played that scene as being full of joy and celebrating this declaration as a really joyful moment, whereas Klaus Kinski plays it full of just mania.
Yeah, mania. That's what he is. He's
yeah,
mania. Mania.
Yes,
yeah,
and it's
Yeah.
just an
yeah,
expression of like madness in him that
Yeah.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah,
That is very much his thing. There's the one bit early on in the film where in fact, in the sort of opening scene, Caruso, the great opera singers, playing in the opera house, and he sort of gets there on his little boat with Claudia Cardinale, and they stand at the back of the opera house, and there's this great scene. There they are, and their eyes are they're just crazy, utterly
mm.
bonkers people amongst all these sort of stuffed shirts, and it's absolutely
Yeah.
horrific.
And he's all kind of dirty from he's got this white suit on, but it's all stained and dirty, and he's all sweaty because
Yeah,
he's just, I love that bit too. That when they show up because they haven't got tickets,
Yeah.
so he's done this mad dash down from he said 1,000 miles to get here because he had to see Caruso, and he doesn't even have a ticket. But it's this wonderful moment where the man who's at the door, um, and he's trying to convince him. He's saying, "Come on, we've come all this way. You have to let us in. We've got to see it." And it's this beautiful moment where he kind of turns and looks, and he kind of goes, I'd like to go in there too,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then he takes them in,
Yeah.
and it's kind of beautiful because like he's someone he's working there at the opera house, and he's been put on the door, and he's probably not paid a lot of money, and he's there to serve all these wealthy people who've come to see the show, but he isn't allowed to go in there. So I just love that little brief moment when he turns and just kind of goes, yeah, you know I'd like to go in there as well. And if so, for that brief minute, they share that dream together, don't they? And they kind of realize it. So I think that's quite just a nice little, beautiful little moment. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you mentioned it.
Yeah. No, it's got lots of great moments in it. I've got sort of a lot of notes. That lots of things leapt out at me. I think, oh, that's
Yeah,
great. That's great. And the hat. It's got a great hat as well. I'm always in for a good hat in a film. And this
yes,
tiny knot on his tie, which he never takes off. He's always wearing a tie, however bad things get.
yes.
Yeah, extraordinary. A white suit. Sorry, despite the appalling mud that he's dealing with every day. Yeah.
What do you think about the other characters? Because I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, but there's the big chap. You see him quite often in films playing villains and stuff, but in this he's sort of the company man who's been sent. He's like the mechanic for the boat, but
Oh
he
yeah.
but he but he's also been put there by the guy who's given him the money or sold him the boat, because he's basically there to spy on him and keep him abreast of how his investments going. But even he at the end, so initially he's almost like a sinister character, and he sort of has this undercurrent of like violence about him. Um, like he's got sticks of dynamite in his pocket, and he's always pulling the gun out and saying, if any of those guys come near the boat, I'm going to be the first one to shoot him, and all this kind of stuff. But then even when they get to the mountain and they're trying to take the boat over, he gets swept up into the dream as well, doesn't he? Everybody does, which is
I think. Do you
quite
mean
interesting.
Miguel Angel Fuentes? I think that's who it is, and he plays Cholo. He's got this sort of quite
Cholo,
long
yes, that's
face.
right. Sorry, I couldn't remember his name, but yeah, and that actor, he's been like he's pops up in a lot of films around that period,
Right.
because obviously he's quite physically, he's quite a big man,
Yeah.
and he's got that look about him. So he's often sort
Yeah, he's
of cast
Mexican.
in roles as a thug or a villain of some kind, and quite a few films.
Right. Yeah.
But he's got quite an interesting, I think, role in this. You know.
He's got an extraordinary looking face as well. Very long and extraordinary prominent
Mm.
cheekbones as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh,
Terrific film. And
And I love the when they hire the when he's hiring people to go on the boat, and everyone just kind of shows up and goes, yeah, yeah, I'm a captain, and he just goes, yeah, okay, you're hired. And then this other guy who's just completely drunk and wasted, and sort of, you wouldn't even let him come near you, but he comes up and he just kind of goes, you know. I want to do this, or I can do this, and he just kind of goes, okay, you could be the cook. He just gives him a job. So it's quite a laid back sort of recruitment process there.
yeah, the cook's a great character because he's sort of always
Yeah,
just popping up with a bottle of rum in his hand.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and even after a lot of the original crew scarpers on him, they all take off. and you just assume that he went with them.
Yeah.
But then later on, he just kind of pops up and just
Yeah.
goes, "What's going on?"
Yeah.
And he kind of goes, "Hey, I thought you left."
I thought he'd sort of led them off the ship, but it turned out he was sort of sleeping off a hangover in the hold somewhere.
No, no, there he is. He was still there. Just yeah, very good.
Yeah, great.
Well, guys, I don't know. Was there anything else? I mean, obviously, Fitzcarraldo is the kind of film we could probably quite, easily talk about it all night. Really, it's just an extraordinary looking film. It's got loads of incredible moments, and it's a kind of film too. Like I said, I've seen it many times in the past, but every time you watch it, you can sort of pick new things out of it. It's kind of film that lends itself very well to repeat viewings, I think,
Yeah.
because it's got so many layers to it and so many things going on that you can always sort of find something new in it every time you watch it. So I rate it quite highly.
Definitely. It's good. I'd heard so much about it. I've never seen it until this week. Can you believe it?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, was this the first time viewing? Oh,
Yeah. I've
brilliant.
seen lots of his sort of later films, 2000s onwards, but few of them from the golden age of Herzog. Not a real.
Well, Jonathan, we'll be revisiting Werner Herzog, I'm sure, in future episodes,
I'm certain of it.
because there are several films of his that I would love to talk a bit
Yeah,
about.
definitely.
Definitely. Well, Dualta, thank you very much for recommending
Oh, thank you.
Fitzcarraldo.
Thanks for having me.
And yeah, no, you're great, and I hope you'll come back another time. We'll talk about something else,
Yeah,
maybe a little
anytime.
less, with a little less testosterone next time,
Yeah.
maybe. And it's great. And of course, listeners, we'd love to hear from you as well. Like, let us know if you have any comments about some of the things we talked about tonight, or the films that we've watched, or if you want to recommend other films about men, about man stuff, or what men are like. Let us know what films you would recommend. We'll be back, I think, in a couple of weeks. We've got some other guests lined up for future episodes. And also, for people who are wondering about the factoids, I would just say that the factoids have been, unfortunately, we've put them on hiatus temporarily, because as I've mentioned, I think recently in the show, I'm about to do a stage production of Spamalot, and it's been taking quite a bit of my spare time. So on top of work and family and other commitments and doing the show and everything, something had to give. So I'm afraid the factoids were that's what had to give. But definitely the factoids will be back. I know Jonathan is he's got his brain churning about some interesting, funky film factoids
Absolutely.
that he's going to want to share with you all. And as soon as I got some time to do a bit more editing, we'll get some out there. And so in the meantime, you might want to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss anything. And definitely follow us and look out for us on social media,
Yeah.
because there's lots of interesting things brewing in the coming weeks and months ahead. There are plans afoot, and I'm not going to say anything too much about it yet because I don't know exactly when it's going to happen. So we want to be as ambiguous as possible so that we're not making any commitments that we can't deliver on, kind of like Thomas on that ski holiday. We don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're disappointing anyone.
No.
So on that note, folks, drop us a line. Make sure you comment or leave a review, because that'll help more people find the show. And tell a friend as well. Go out and tell your friends all about Film Swap, and bring them along next time. So we'd love to hear from y'all. And Dualta, thanks again for joining us tonight. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
You've been great, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, the things these nerdy middle-aged men get up to.